Namaste. A little bit louder, please. Namaste. Namaste. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Dhanyavad, firstly, to the organizers of the youth conference. If you just think about the logistics and the sheer scale of what we're doing here today, there is a very popular nara that says Sangathan mein Shakti hai, which loosely translates to strength in unity. So if you look at what the World Hindu Congress is trying to do here today, bring many of us here together, surely there is some strength that we can develop from within that. Dhanyavad to the organizers firstly. Dhanyavad also to our elders, our adhikaris, pracharaks, our mentors, our guiding lights, who have recognized within us something and have provided us with opportunities to carry on walking upon this path. So pranam to our adhikaris. Dhanyavad also to you, sitting here today, for your attendance. Over 2,500 delegates from 60 different countries in 7 parallel conferences. And you guys decided to be in this room with us here today. So dhanyavad to you too. Just a few house rules before we get involved. Firstly, with your mobile phones, please can you get them out now and check that they are on silent. And also a request of courtesy and respect for our panel and everyone here today. I don't believe any of you will, but no interruptions, no heckling, no calling out. If you feel to clap or chant and all, that's great. As a matter of discipline, I will ask our panelists to stick to their allotted times. If they were to go over that time, very respectfully I'll ask them to stop. We are here for efficiency and time management for everyone, so just stick to your times. And for yourselves, when asking questions, be very specific. It's nice to have statements to make. We can do that later on in the session when we network. So if you're going to come up and ask, make a statement, make sure that your question then ends with a question mark. When you do approach, we'll come to the front, we have a mic runner. Be very short and specific. So within 20 to 30 seconds, your name, where you're from, and what your question is. Coming from the UK, the majority of our Hindu population are third generation, second or third generation. And when I look to our parents' generation, their sole aim was to survive, adapt, and settle into this unknown land, into a Pradesh. Yet they still managed to instill within us virtues, values, and sanskars. If ever you're in doubt about that and require evidence, just look around the room here today. Now it is our turn, the youth, to amplify, claim back, and bear the torch of Hindu Dharma. As we've seen across our conferences at the World Hindu Congress, the general narrative is about owning the narrative of Hindu Dharma. And what better way to do that than in the media? And proactively, of course. So can I just have a show of hands who has some type of social media account? Very surprised if there wasn't anyone that raised their hand. The type of proactivity that I'm talking about is that of a monk, a young monk, 125 years ago, with no money, in orange robes, turned up in a foreign land and was able to address over 6,000 people at the Fullerton Hall at what is now the Art Institute of Chicago. Do you think if he had Twitter or Facebook, he would have done hashtag 1893? It was that speech 125 years ago that paved the way for us. That is primarily the reason we're in this room here today. That type of proactivity is what is needed today. On this panel then, we have some experts who are in content marketing, present upon the big screen, and the smaller screens, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, the social medias. I expect you in your own time to read through the speaker profiles. I won't read out what's up on our PowerPoint. What I'd like to introduce first is our first speaker, who's Vinay Singhal, the CEO of a company called WittyFeed, who believes in the community spirit and believes that in Bharat he will be what's a change agent. His company is worth a handsome figure and spread across many different countries and brands. Let's bring on Vinay ji to give our first address.
Namaste everyone. So I was in the media conference on the panel just before this, and first of all, apologies, maafi chahta hu aap sabse that you guys had to wait because I was a little late there. So I asked them same thing. I was speaking on a very similar topic in that panel also. The topic was very overlapping with this one as well. So the best thing that I loved about this conference is that and you all will be able to relate to it because we all are much younger people in this room, is that one, everybody greets here everybody else with a namaste, younger, elder, richer, poor, doesn't matter. And after the name, everybody uses a G. Is that correct? And that, my dear friends, is the real values of Hinduism right there for you, being told in the most native way possible. So I would actually like to congratulate once again the conference, the organizers, to be able to use that as a narrative all across. So round of applause for all the. Of course, no prizes for guessing that we all are extremely thankful to the organizers for organizing such a beautiful conference here. And couldn't be a better venue and time to organize this on the 125th anniversary month of Swami Vivekananda's speech, historic speech in Chicago. I'm supposed to speak, so the overall topic of our panel right now is proactive engagement in the media of youth, and I chose to speak on changing the narrative of Hinduism. And a lot of you will agree with me when I say that today there is this fear in which we live, where we don't want to be identified as Hindus. People, the younger generation somehow is just not identifying themselves with Hindus because there's such a negative notion, there's such a negative narrative that has been attached with the whole religion and with the whole term, that it has become extremely difficult for the younger generation to be able to identify themselves with it. I want to start by telling you, giving you a little bit of history of the word and the religion itself. The word Hinduism actually was, the word Hindu was actually for the first time was used in 1823 by Lord Macaulay of Britishers, who basically brought a lot of intellectuals. In the literature, and officially, it was used for the first time in 1823, where he brought in intellectuals in the country, in India, and said that we need to create a group of intellectuals / interpreters who will be Indians by looks and Britishers and Westerns basically by their thought process, so that we don't just rule this country, we also enslave them in their minds. And that is when the whole narrative of Hindu and Hinduism started to become so big. There's another word that we use today, which is Hindutva. The word Hindutva for the first time was used in 1923, exactly 100 years later, the first one. The word Hindutva means the dominance of Hindu Dharma. Would you have guessed the meaning by the narrative that we hear around the world today in the mainstream media? There is no way, right? So that is basically to tell you the state of media, the way narratives are being built, and how exactly we are being fed the wrong information and the wrong narrative out there. Talking about the history of our religion, the actual name that we all identify with our Hindu Dharma, what is fondly and across the world globally called Hindu Dharma today is Sanatan Dharma, right? Sanatan, do you know, let me tell you the meaning of the word Sanatan. The word Sanatan means the eternal law. The word means the eternal law. Meaning, the laws of living life even before the human history. That's what the Sanatan Dharma is all about. I'll tell you what, it's not even a religion. What is it is basically nothing but a collection of rules, rituals, and some traditions put together to live a happy and prosperous life. Now tell me something. Can you ever explain a religion in a much more simpler way? That right there is the beauty of this beautiful, this amazing religion that we all are born with. So you can clap yourself and you can be proud that you've been born into the Sanatana religion. Now, because we all are young people and we understand technology a little better, and I am an engineer by education, let me explain you a little bit by, in your language, in our language, that how do you relate to the whole religion? See, there is something called platform and then there is something called product. In technology, in internet, when we build things, we build platforms and we build products. A platform is something on the top of which you build products. For example, internet is a platform. Internet is a platform that we were all given, the human discovered it a few years ago, and then on the top of that, the products that we built were Facebook, were Twitter, were Google, all the internet companies, all the digital media companies that we have built. In exact same way, Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma is actually the internet of the world for religions, and every other or most of the religions have been actually built on the top of that. To put it in a better in better words, Hinduism is like the open source religion of the world. Right? Hinduism is like the open source religion of the world. What do you do with open source? You basically take it, you modify it in your own way, it accepts you. You change something, you rebrand it and put it in your name out there, it's still okay. Nobody minds it because it's open source. That is exactly what Hinduism has achieved in the history that no one knows how long it goes back. We basically have been the open source religion for Sikhism. We have been the open source religion on the top of which Jainism has been built, Buddhism has been built, and most of the religions in the world have been inspired and have taken some or the other thing from Hinduism because it goes back to the first BC that we have proof of, and who knows, even before that as well, right? So we all can take a lot of pride and we all can understand this from this perspective. This is also one way to explain it to the younger generation that they probably will be able to understand the whole religion better and in a much better perspective. Talking about narratives, I started by telling you that today a lot of young people, a lot of youth doesn't really identify themselves with religion because they are scared of it. They have a very negative notion attached to it. How do you actually, or let's talk about narrative a little bit. What's the current narrative? The narrative that is Hinduism is all about and what comes out in media at least. And I'll basically conclude with how do we protect, why should we proactively engage in the media to counter that? See, because we do not engage in proactively in media so much, the narrative that comes out and the narrative that exists today is basically of Hindutva in the negative notion, is of, love jihad, ghar wapsi, and maybe all different sorts of things that you hear and that are attached with us. Probably the only thing, probably the Muslims is the other word that we all keep using about. But I'll tell you what, our religion is way beyond that. The narrative that we need to talk about and how do we need to speak to the younger generation is using all the rationale and all the scientific ways of explaining the religion to them. I'll tell you what, why do people believe in science so much? Because they say that it has been proved, it has been, that you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. Let me ask you a simple question. How many of you actually seen an atom? How many of have you actually know someone, live about yourself, or can prove that somebody has seen a Big Bang Theory? No one, right? But we believe in that because experts in that field did it, proved it by some theories, some calculations, and then they told us, and so we believe in that. That's exactly how we need to explain religion to our younger generation, and that's the narrative we need to build. Experts, they felt it, they practiced it, they discovered it in so many ways. They brought out all the narrative, they brought out all the knowledge and they gave it to us. We need to trust it because we trust science, so we need to trust religion exactly the same. Did you know that Hinduism actually, I'll take just 1 minute, Hinduism actually has proof in its Vedas about the theory of relativity, time travel. For that matter actually, and it's not a joke, that we actually have proofs of aeroplanes being in our Granthas way before airplanes were discovered. I mean, we just need to talk about the scientific narrative of it because that's what the younger generation understands. I'll end up with one example. I was talking to someone yesterday, just 1 minute and I'll finish it. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday at the media conference and he told me that he lives in Chicago and he goes to a temple. He's very young, he's our age. He goes in the temple with his wife and he's most of the time he's the youngest guy in the temple. And people stare at him and he's like, people look at us and probably they're thinking that we need more of you in the temples. And then he said, I got invited to an Eid party by some of my Islamic friends. I went to a mosque. And what I noticed was that, they did not worry about the place where they actually do namaz. What they had built was, with the mosque, they had built a huge sports complex. There were basketball, there was gym, there were so many other things. And then I'll tell you, it was packed with the young people in the community. The point I'm trying to make is, in an era where the attention span of youth is 3 seconds, you need to figure out ways to talk to them in their language, in what they are interested in, provide them things and services that a community can give it to them, make them interested into it, bring them to temples, and then loop into the larger narrative of your religion. That's exactly what we need to do to build the narrative. Thank you so much for your attention.
To Vinay ji. I especially like the open source platform. I think I'll take that and use that myself. Next on our panel, we have Aditya ji Patwardhan, who is an LA-based filmmaker. Spent the last couple of days with Aditya ji. You can resonate with being a Hindu out in the West, where there aren't many filmmakers of his stature. So again, if you look at your speaker profile books, you'll see how many different streams he's been involved in, different languages of projects that he's working upon, and the documentaries, the series plots, and the short films that he's been producing. So Aditya today will be talking about redefining the word Hindu in the media. Let's please welcome Aditya to the stage.
Pranam. It is amazing to speak to such an amazing audience and alongside such wonderful speakers. I'm Aditya Patwardhan. I'm a film director producer, originally from Jaipur but now I'm in Los Angeles. Coming from a background of a Hindu family and being in media, one of the key things or questions that have been a part of my journey is that what role can media play for the Hindu Dharma, and in return, what role can Hindu Dharma play for the media? Film and television and social media recently has been one of the key influences in the last 100 years on the human mind, as it's nothing new for us. In fact, most of our everyday actions, things we do in daily life, are in fact governed by ideas that are incepted by things that we see in social media. Hence, when it comes to talking about the representation of Hindu Dharma in media, we have to make sure that we don't follow the same path that other ideologies or other religious lobbies do, because if we do that, we'll be doing harm to it. And we'll end up doing a propaganda for Hindu religion. And we are not a religion. There is no compulsive scripture to follow. There is no 10 commandment moral code to live by. There is no doctrine to preach. Instead, it's a seemingly complex way of life that is based on astronomy, human anatomy, and a seeking for spiritual liberation. Hence, when it comes to the portrayal of Hindu Dharma in media, the filmmaker, such as me or any others that might try, have to make sure that they are in touch with the scientific and logical core of this religion, or sorry to use the word, of this dharma, or this way of life. let's go back a bit. In Bharat, and not the country that we see in sense of a nation today, but the whole subcontinent in the classical sense, it was always understood that what happens inside this body and what happens outside the boundaries of this body is in sync with each other. They understood the forces of nature, cycles of sun, moon, planets, declination of the earth, the water cycles, seasons, and how it all mirrored itself in our bodies and our everyday lives and in the society. It is this understanding that in fact gave rise to what we now call as the Hindu Dharma. Now when a Dharma is based on such dynamic system and it has to be portrayed through media, the viewers and the filmmakers both have to be in at least a similar frame of mind to understand each other. Now I'm a filmmaker and I prefer that my films do all my talking for me, so I'm not at the, I go to this, but this is not a screening in Los Angeles, so I try to give examples from two of my projects. The first one is called Eastern Shores of the Western World. It's a documentary which I made in Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and parts of Europe. It's a study of similarities between the Vedic Dharma and the pagan religions of Eastern Europe and Baltic countries. It has been shown at the UN, it has been in many festivals in the United States, in Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, and so on. Recently, it was on Doordarshan for a month and on Lok Sabha TV. The primary purpose of this documentary was not to show the commonalities of the Indo-European culture in terms that, oh, we all pray to the same God. Neither was it to establish that European pagan religions came out of Indian religion. That's not the point. In fact, the idea was to highlight that whatever commonalities we have are based on cosmology. For instance, I'll take an example from the film. The Greek Zeus, the Roman Jupiter, Vedic Dior Parjanya, and the Baltic Perkunus. They are kind of concepts of space-time, you can call it from Proto-Rig, and the 12 manifestations based on the solar lunar calendar. I kept that in mind, that inclusiveness is the central idea of Hindu Dharma. And nowhere in the documentary I should be pointing out that we are above that paganism, or they were above us, or we are the originator, or the commonalities, or are that of divinity and prayer. If the pursuit is a higher question, then it doesn't matter who came first and who came second. The documentary is already on TV and on YouTube, and I would love if you guys can have a look and give me feedback. The second example is that of a feature film that I produced and directed this year. It's coming out sometime in December or January. It's called The Upstream Story. Now the producers include people like producers for this film. It includes people like Julia Verdon, who has produced Al Pacino's films like Merchant of Venice, etc. And Ian Lafray. Ian Lafray is an Emmy Award winner screenwriter, and he has the OBE, the Order of British Empire from London, from the Queen. Why I'm saying this? Because believe me, a film on Hindu Dharma is not something Hollywood is keen on making. But as I said, this film is on Hindu Dharma, not on Hindu religion. I don't want to reveal too much of the story, as I want everybody to enjoy it once it comes out. But still, I'll tell a brief synopsis so that we can get to the point. It's a parallel story of two girls. One is Adriana, a Venezuelan refugee who's traveling in India and Bharat from south to north, from Kanyakumari to Haridwar. And the second is Kankana, an Indian-American girl who grew up in India but is now an actress in Los Angeles. And she's attending classical Indian music classes with the Bharat Gharana of Jaipur. It's a feature film, not a documentary, so of course I have to keep my viewers engaged in a drama, in a story of these two girls and the characters that are in the film. You'll see arcs going up and down and everything. But at the core, you'll see in the movie that it is the vast and deep social fabric of India that helps the character of Adriana find whatever she's seeking in the movie. It helps her realize her purpose and gives her a higher question. In case of Adriana, though a story comes from a film actress background, subtly in the background we'll see that through Indian classical music and its teaching, I've tried to introduce that how in the Bharatiya Shastriya Sangeet, Indian classical music, is linked to astronomy and how it's linked to meditation and yoga. Now this whole movie nowhere has the word Hindu Dharma, Hindutva, Ved, Bhagavad, anything mentioned anywhere in terms of visuals or in terms of content. If I had done that, producers like Julia or Ian would not have been with me. Surely wouldn't have been produced in Hollywood, and for sure not in Bollywood. I think I was able to get these. People on board. I was able to get people like Julia, like Ian, like Sadhguru Jagdishwadev, like Pandit Krishna Mohan, but I was able to get them on board because I stayed away from nomenclature and I concentrated on the content. These are two examples that I wanted to give, like how we can have Hindutva can have a role in media without explicitly being about Hindutva and rather being about content and the scientific base that we have. That brings us to the final question of why media is important. I'm not saying we should use media as a tool for Hindutva because I'm a media person or media is the latest trend. Why I'm saying this is, let's go back a few years. You can always argue that Hindu Dharma is such an organic and dynamic system. Why do we need to propagate it and force it through a medium? It will evolve on its own. I agree. But let's go back a few years. Let's go by biblical standards. So let's go back 2 millenniums. 500 BC. Sanskrit was already out of touch with common people. Ved and Upanishad was limited to a section of society that could understand it. Layers Sanskrit had were too hard to comprehend. Simpler languages and simpler concepts and simpler religions had taken over the mindset of the common people in the Indian subcontinent. It was during this time that the Puranas were born. Very simple stories, very simple narratives to explain the very deep concept of the Vedas. It was the Puranas that helped texts like the Vedas and the Upanishads survive through centuries. It was Puranas that helped our religion, our Hindu Dharma to sustain in the lives of common mind with rituals, with simple stories, when we were going through invasions, when we were made to forget our clothing, our language, our way of life, the food we eat. Everything was influenced, yet the core stayed there because there was something as simple as Puranas and rituals and religions to understand what was happening in Vedas and Upanishads. Coming to modern era, we don't have time to do a 12-year study in midway, or we don't have time to do a detailed class in Sanskrit. So why can't media act as the new age Purana for now? Simple concepts explained to everyday people so that they can orient themselves. And as filmmakers, or as Vinay here is in social media, or as Karolina, it's not our job to explain details of midway. Even we don't know that. But what we can do is we can make the right orientation. If the person at least gets interested in the subject, at least there is a feeling of seeking comes in, then it's the age of internet. You just have to open Wikipedia if you're the simpler guy. And if you're a deeper one, you have so many options to do other things. So basically that is what my thought is on proactive engagement in media and how media can play a role. Once again, to conclude, to summarize, it should be about the content, it should be about logic, it should be about science of what the life systems of Indian subcontinent are, not about nomenclature and not about naming. I think that's the way how it was done by many of the other religious lobbies, which I don't want to name, but that's how it was done in Hollywood for the last 150 years. And I think that subtle way is the way to go for this. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Aditya. I'm sure everyone in this room will go and watch your film. Is that right? Yes. Next, we have Karolina Goswami, who is the founder of India in Details, a very proactive and challenging YouTube/Facebook narrative. Lots of followers online, roughly over 1 million different followers across platforms. What's especially different about Karolina is that she is challenging biases and presented in a rational way. Very popular, of course. I watched many of the videos. If you haven't, please do so afterwards. I think we'll be showing them later today, and in the next session there'll be a feature length, one of the videos that we will be documenting also. Let's bring Karolina to the stage. So we're going to watch a video first, and then we'll move Karolina to the stage. So let's just watch.
Indians want to be job creators. The survey revealed that more than 80% of the Indian workforce would love to be an entrepreneur, as this gives them more exciting opportunities. India is the world's largest sourcing destination for the information technology industry. The Indian e-commerce market is one of the world's fastest growing. And India has the world's third largest startup ecosystem. The Indian pharmaceutical industry has contributed immensely in global healthcare. It supplies 40% of generics consumed in the US and 25% of all the medicines dispensed in the UK. Globally, 30% of the annual UNICEF requirement and 60% of ARV drugs are supplied by India. India is the world's largest cutting and polishing center for diamonds, and in 2017, it exported 75% of the world's polished diamonds. India ranked third in terms of steel production, and it is already the largest manufacturer of two-wheelers and tractors in the world. It is world's third largest heavy truck manufacturer and fourth largest car producer. India is the world's largest producer of dairy, and globally, it is the largest milk-producing country since 1997. It ranks second in fruits and vegetables production in the world. And in other agricultural commodities like rice, wheat and pulses, it is also among the top producers. After the United States, Japan and China, India is the fourth largest producer of agrochemicals globally. India is aiming to be a $10 trillion economy in 2030. As a tourist destination and as an investment destination, the country has started to promote itself on various international forums. The Center for International Development at Harvard University expects India to be the fastest growing economy in the world for the coming decade. According to them, the economic pole of global growth has moved over the past few years from China to neighboring India, where it is likely to stay over the coming decade. India is expected to overtake Japan to become world's third largest construction market by 2021. The construction market in India will grow nearly twice as fast as China to 2030. By 2020, it is expected to become fourth largest manufacturer of automobiles globally. Under the AMP 2026 policy, the Indian auto component industry is set to touch $200 billion. And it has been predicted that the country will rank fifth in the consumer durables market in the world by 2025. It is projected by IATA that India will overtake the UK to become the third largest air passenger market by 2025. By 2022, the country's electrical equipment industry is targeted to reach $100 billion. And it was revealed in this report that by 2025, the retail market in India will cross $2 trillion. In renewable energy, India is already overachieving, as it is well positioned to surpass its 2022 renewable energy target. In Paris, India pledged that by 2030, 40% of its installed capacity will come from renewable sources. At present, renewable sources account for nearly 20% of India's total installed capacity, and with hydropower, it is already about 30%. Therefore, it shouldn't be a surprise if India ends up having 50% of its power generation capacity coming from renewable sources in 2030. This may already sound very impressive, but India's true potential is even more. According to recent estimates, India's solar potential is greater than 10,000 gigawatts, and its wind potential could be higher than 2,000 gigawatts. Space industry, medical tourism, infrastructure, textiles, wellness. India is making progress in multiple sectors. It is also strengthening its defense. India is already considered as the fourth strongest military power in the world. In terms of ticket sales and number of films made, India has the world's largest film industry. Its massive broadcasting and distribution industry has more than 60,000 local cable operators, 900 satellite TV channels, 7 DTH operators, 6,000 multi-system operators, and a few IPTV service providers. India has around 115,000 registered newspapers and periodicals, and it is expected that it will have nearly 600 million internet users by 2019. Despite this, India does not have a single news channel which can call itself global in a true sense. This is one of the reasons why outside India, most people are not very aware of India's perspective. India is big, India is diverse, and understanding India can be complex even for Indians, let alone the rest of the world. It is 2018, and India is rebuilding, but in this process, it has its share of vulnerabilities. Many Indians continue to suffer from a post-colonial identity crisis, and they need to be empowered. Many of them are just innocently ill-informed about the Western world. For many of them, the West is the shining pillar of all virtues. Many Western ideas and practices are blindly imported without any critical examination. India does not have a dedicated think tank which can deeply analyze the global affairs and help Indians in learning the best global practices and also help them in rejecting the failed foreign experiments. Globalization may be a good idea, but globalization does not mean Westernization. In terms of their global online outreach, but have they done enough to keep us well informed? For instance, how many of us know that the study which was done to closely analyze the international child sexual abuse material revealed that 78.8% of visible offenders were white? The study was financed by the European Union. How many of us know that most of the companies that handle servers which permit the functioning of many websites where child sexual abuse material is spread are actually located in Europe and America? In this day and age, if such cruel and inhuman acts with children can find well-established economic support in America and Europe, what hope is there for us to remain optimistic? Are these stories not important enough? Has the Western media done enough to highlight them? I love India for its ancient culture, for its hospitable people, for its cuisine, and most significantly, for its ancient foundational wisdom that encourages questioning and self-exploration. But can India preserve its timeless heritage? India may grow economically, and its citizens may become wealthy. But will India remain India? See you again.
Namaskar to everyone. Western media outlets have a massive global outreach, which means that globally they are very effective in spreading their message and opinion. But in the Western media, one of the problems is that their narrative is still driven by a sense of white elitism. And in this narrative, many important stories are not given enough coverage. How many of you know that even today, in 2018, in many states of the USA, children can get married at any age if certain conditions are met? According to Unchained at Last, more than 240,000 children were married in the US between 2000 and 2010. Even today, in many European countries, sex without consent is not rape. There are 20 European countries which have ratified the Istanbul Convention, but most of them have not changed their laws yet, which means that they have not enacted consent-based legislation. But have we shown enough concern for them? Our media in Europe is not doing enough to highlight our painful stories. Can we afford to continue this way? How many of us know about the toxic air of the famous Oxford Street of London when it recorded the highest levels of nitrogen dioxide in the world? A study by London's King's College revealed that. Many countries in Asia and Africa are blindly adopting the Western growth model without properly studying what it will do to our planet. When the statistics of ecological footprint of various countries were compared, it was found that if everyone in the world started to live like an average American, we would need 5 Earths. Probably you were told that Australia is one of the best destinations for international students. But did anyone tell you about a report from the Australian Human Rights Commission which revealed that 51% of students were sexually harassed in 2016? How many of us know that it was estimated by the National Crime Agency in the UK that 750,000 men in Britain have an interest in having sex with children? Bharat's ancient wisdom and Bharat's traditional knowledge do have many solutions for our current problems. Bharat's ancient tradition of aparigraha is the answer to our high ecological footprint. Bharat's Vasudev Kutumbakam and Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu are the answer to the problem of growing intolerance. Bharat's yoga and wellness can reduce the cost of healthcare. At India in Details, I am using the power of social media to reach out to the world. Through Facebook and YouTube, we have been neutralizing the biased existing narratives and we are bringing out the lesser-known facts and studies. At India in Details, I have produced more than 70 episodes on India. We have had more than 50 million views in the last 2 years or so. We are data-driven, and our focus is on accuracy in presenting facts. Please come forward to help us in spreading and expanding our work. Bharat's values and principles can bring peace and stability in the world. Historically, there have been many ideologies that have had their entire focus on conquering the world. That has been their main objective. The idea to conquer the world has only given us violence and hate. But Bharat's Dharmic traditions encourage us to focus on conquering our minds and not the world. In Dharmic traditions, the main objective is to conquer yourself. How extraordinary this approach is. This is the very reason that I have decided to come here, because I want more people in the world to learn about this approach. Bharat's yoga can help in healing minds. Through Bharat's ancient principles and values on a global scale, if we can encourage people to heal their minds, we can reduce all sorts of crimes and wrongdoings. That is why it is important for Bharat to educate the world about its values, its principles, and its extraordinary approach that strongly deals with inward domain. Thank you.
To Karolina ji, I think in Details, based on critical thinking, presenting lesser known facts, and the high quality of the video we saw, the sheer number of views. Presenting those facts, I think that deserves another round of applause. And being a mother at the same time. Taking care of it. So thank you again to our panel. I think we have looked at the need for the Hindu youth to help influence policy making, change social attitudes, and to use this approach to provide a proactive and consistent message rather than reactive that we're sort of generally known for. We're going to move on to the question and answer session now for our panel. If you have a question, please come to the front. But just before we go there, because it's a youth conference, you're going to ask a question, you need to be under the age of 35. So, sorry Sachinji, you can't ask a question here. So if you have a question, please come to the front. We do have a mic runner here. Again, we just want your name, your location, and then make sure that what you're going to say next ends in a question mark. You want to be very specific. And as chair, I reserve the right to dismiss your question if it's not applicable, or if it's not specific, just as a matter of discipline. So please, if we have some questions, come back to the front, please.
First of all, I want to say thank you all for your presence here. I think each of your individual efforts are very admirable for our cause to increase our presence out in the world as far as our religion, our society, and our organizations and efforts to unite each other. The question that I had for you was, and I think this is a question that many of us probably would like to ask, is as we get involved in these various hindu organizations and efforts to strengthen our community, how do you find the best way to balance your professional aspirations with your societal obligations to the Hindu community? How do you balance that?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I have two features coming out. So how I balance is one of them has a very strong element of Hindu. The second one is completely drama. It's a Korean K-pop movie. So that's one way to balance it. Another is having the lead towards Hindutva. I keep in mind like my story should have some element of it without the name and any kind of nomenclature, but some element. If there's Indian classical music, then it's that. If it's a story set completely in Los Angeles, or it's a film about non-Indians, some element I can borrow from Dharma traditions and keep it there. I think that in itself is a contribution to these organizations, even if it's not very good.
So exactly, taking an extension to his answer, this in our world is called native content marketing, basically, right? And we need a lot of that for Hinduism. And this is what exactly we do as well, that while we do a lot of stories that make sense to the younger generation, 15 to 35 is our audience in India, in US, in UK, in Canada, all the countries. But while we do that, we also do stories. For example, one of the very hot topic for all of us, for younger generations, for example, discussion depression, right? So we discuss about it, and we basically discuss remedies that take us back to our roots, our ancient ways of solving depression as a problem in such a easy and efficient way. So that is just one example, but we do that to basically a wide array of topics. We talk about the positive side of the religion, we talk about the real meanings of it, and facts and the science angle, which both of us actually talked about during our talks, that the youth connects back to logic. So at least in both our jobs, we speak to the younger generation more than we speak to the older one, and there, we being in content, both of us at least, it's an amazing space to be, because there's nothing better to influence the younger minds, and we do that by producing content that can help them discover the religion better.
I hope that answers the question. If not, we must engage in these
By the way,
conversations afterwards.
Mr. Yadav is the gentleman who told me the most story. So yeah, round of applause for him as well.
Okay, next question please.
Hello, my name is Siddhant. I'm a recent graduate from Singhal State University. And my question is, movies which depict our history, they are sometimes tuned to, for some or the other reason. So do you think that affects our narrative, and if so, how?
What do you mean tuned?
Let's say if it might be altered, or it might be tuned to fit the modern world, or maybe maximize profit. So
it's what you just said. It's to maximize profits. It's what markets these industries at. And the straight fact is that the industry is not run by people who are minded. So to have a bigger influence on the whole industry, the industry needs to be leading towards us. But what we can do as individuals in this field, in our way, we can't go all into work, otherwise we'll be kicked out from there. But we can certainly, sticking to our roots, stick to logic and try to change them.
I have an example quote there. How many of you actually saw the movie Padmavati, whatever you want to call it? How many of you actually, after watching the movie, you felt like actually kicking some of those senas and tell them that, idiots, this movie actually put us in a much more honorable state than we. For example, I had no idea whatsoever about the history of Padmavat, the Rani, the story, the Rajputs, and when that last climax where the Rajput king actually dies. I mean, that's a goosebumpy event. That makes you so much proud, because that guy just simply refused to use any sort of wrong methods. Like, I don't know if there was some part of it which was altered to suit the market. I'm sure there were songs entered which were not back then. I'm sure there was some drama put into there. I'm sure there was little more dramatization to it because that's what you need in content to attract a larger audience. But then, that's how the world, that's how you have to basically adapt your content for the mass market while you keep the basic essence and the message intact in your content. That's how you reach the larger audience.
Hello, I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. My name is Radant. I have a question for Vinay ji. So, since you are part of WittyFeed, you also know the structure of all the other websites like Scoop or Wired, or there are a ton of websites. So, a lot of these websites, they make content that sells, but it's not important. I'm not talking about your particular website. I'm just talking.
We do that also.
I'm just talking in general about all those websites that people keep on sharing on WhatsApp and Facebook. So all these websites, they create content that's not important but that sells, but they do not create a lot of important content that doesn't sell, but if they put it there, it might be controversial. Now that content is important because if, let's say there's an event happening and someone is trying to bring out the truth, but then if they put it out, some a group of individuals from a different...
Let's hear the question.
Yeah, straight to the question. Straight to the question. So, in this commercialized era of all the websites, as a user, how do we decide what is important and what is just a clickbait website?
So I'll tell you what, first of all, if we all start to do just what is important, we'll become a little too boring. And that will not be such a good thing for the world, right? We don't just do important things, right? One. Second, see, that is where your self-awareness comes into picture. There are a lot of websites with Western agenda. There are there's a lot of content that is irrelevant, which is created a lot of times. But then, if you end up clicking on it, it was your choice, right? So you probably wanted to know something or the other around it. And if you do it once and you discover that the website actually ditched you, the platform actually ditched you, they did not serve what you were looking for, just stop following it. It's as simple as that. Just simply block them, right? The platforms allow you to do that and follow only the ones that serve your purpose. We all are in this room educated enough to actually do that, so we should.
That's individual choice, and then there are a lot of websites that try to promote.
You got to stay in tune. We'll carry on the discussion afterwards. Let's have another question, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Rohan Sharma. I'm from Princeton, New Jersey. My question, it has to do with public policy and research and the way that that's presented. So public policy is an interest of mine, and when you talk about scientific research being presented as like a solution, these discoveries that we found in this paper can be used in public policy to change policy this way. A lot of the anti-Hindu bias is that, Hindus are just trying to prove that they were right all along with their basic systems. So, while sometimes that is the case, and that's what they're trying to do, it almost discounts the work that we're doing. So how do we combat that bias or that recognition of Hindu bias towards proving that we were right all along, and still, show validity in whatever thing?
You mean combat that through how media can play a role in combating? Like I said before, it's based on what content you're showing, and that content will help even, say, the people who have an anti-Hindu bias. They're not necessarily anti-Indian or they don't get an anti-Bharati feeling or like that. It's just that they have been made to think in a way that this is an old system and it's superstitious, it's dogmatic and all that. What media can do is orient them in the right direction. It's not our job to teach them something extra. But let's say an example, if, for example, my film, I'll tell you a little more of the story, but I have used classical music throughout the movie as a key tool for this girl's character whenever she is in the class with the guru. The things that are being taught are always the speed of her breathing, how to sync with the motion of the earth, that how in 120 seconds, how many minutes the earth moves, what is the angular size of the sun, and what is the speed of breathing, what is the tempo of the rag that she is doing, and the rag is going on in the morning. Now all this information becomes documentary if I speak like this, but it is split throughout the film in different classes. while she's living her own story, like her problem with the family, whatever her story is in the film. So I think things like that. Another thing we can do is calendar. The Vedic lunar solar calendar is one of the most scientific systems that were made. And even if people understand that calendar just that much, like what WittyFeed is, half the festivals start making sense. You don't even have to pray on that day anymore, because that festival will make so much sense for you. Janmashtami will suddenly become a thing like, oh, I don't need to actually pray, I just understand what it is. So if such things can come in media, simple solutions and orientations, people will start, anti-Hindu people also will start viewing, they're not villains, they are just oriented the other way. And we have to counter that with logic, because it will be right.
Janmashtami example just reminded me, we actually, this and last week, we actually held a Krishna Katha in our office. And the idea was, we have 140 people, our average is 24, right? Extremely young people. So, can we tell them the real reason behind it so that you don't have to celebrate it anymore, right? To answer your question in a larger context, to actually answer this, you need to first understand why do we need, why is there a need actually where we have to combat and we have to prove that we were right all along, right? Because last 800 years, we've been suppressed. We have lived life of suppression, right? Probably last 60, 70 years that we finally became independent and we started with some voice. And that also was independent on the papers, probably not so much. 10 years ago, when social media became so big, we all got so many tools in our hands that we were actually able to raise our voice. We were able to tell our narrative. We were able to tell that, dude, this we were saying all along. We were able to actually say that, and I'll tell you what, it'll take some time for the world to accept it, but then we need to keep saying it, number one. And second, instead of trying to say, so, there are negotiation techniques that you get to learn when you run a business, right? See, there is one way when you say, see, I was right all along, and there's another one, you certainly just, make your point and let the other guy absorb that, okay, yeah, you were right all along. You let them say that, right? So, that's the, if I were you, if I'm you a lot of times, I actually do that, I just make my point and let the guy say, yeah, I think you're right. So, and it becomes a whole different story altogether.
Thank you for that. I think just a note then also about policy making, and maybe we don't need to rely on the media to do that. We can create our own avenues. So actually in the conference here, we've got a few people representing from Vijay in the UK. And what we do with this platform is identify, because it's based in Britain, identify modern British problems and analyze those with a Paramic lens. We speak to expert witnesses and scholars and create content that we can give to policymakers. And in 5-10 years' time, we are influencing the influencers from the down behind it. So that's one way, and maybe you can look at the journal online to see the work that we're doing.
It's a little related. I have one more point to make. Yesterday I met this gentleman who runs this app called Gurukula. And because all of you are influencers in your own houses, and we all are going through a problem where how do I connect the next generation with the religion? This app basically does what is, this guy is really a Sanskrit expert, so he has read the real scriptures himself and translated them into audio, video, comics, and one more format that I don't remember. All those literature, all those stories in small comics and small audios and video stories, which we usually today end up giving a phone in your kid's hand, and we make them watch the YouTube channels, and there is YouTube Kids and all that. So I would say just download the app Gurukula, give them that, and you will build a generation of people which will learn all of this by default. And when they are of our age, for example, and they will not have to be in a paradox where how do I prove it that I was actually right, and they will not have to be in a confusion state, because they will know those things so from the basic that they'll be able to just explain it to them. So that's another way to change it in the longer format.
Thank you. I think from a session that we heard yesterday in this very session about can we change that narrative? Thank you. Let's have another question, please.
Namaste. I'm Aditya from Australia. I apologise for my voice. I've lost it, so I'm trying my best. Congratulations, lovely talk. It's very inspirational. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. And you really correctly highlighted how scientific basis will help bridge the gap for the Y generation in acknowledging our heritage. Nomenclature will be critical at some point. For our younger generation, the scientific explanations will get us only so far. Then nomenclature will be critical for them to acknowledge and in fact spread that amongst the peers. So at what point, because I think media does have a critical role, at what point do you feel the media can assist in bridging that nomenclature? The second question is, as Karolina ji has highlighted, controlling media houses is critical, funding comes to play. So how can we create institutionalized channels of funding to create media houses and control not only the research but the dissemination of that information?
I think I can answer your second question much better, so I'll start with that. It's absolutely correct that actually media, when it comes to media, the ownership, the funding comes into the picture, and that is what actually dilutes the narrative. 80-85% of the world media is owned by Christians, Jews, Parsis, and leftists in the case of India. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it that they own it. But the only problem with the whole situation is that you cannot expect a Hindu point being forward in the right way from somebody who does not understand the Hindu ideology at the core of it, right? So when we started WittyFeed as a platform, and today we have 6 different websites and 100 million users every month all across the world on our content, I was told by every single industry guy, investor, everybody that, India cannot do global. And even if you were media, global media from India, it's just not possible. I'm so proud to tell you today that out of 100 million that we do every month, 60 million of that is not from India. And when I say that, 30 million every month from US alone, every third American was on our platform in 2016 and in 2017 as well, and I'm sure in 2018 we will beat the number. My point is, and me being a Hindu at the core of it, even when I don't think my family doesn't come from a very extremely, on the extreme side of Hinduism and all. I've grown up in a family where prayers are normal, we do that, and I was exposed to all of this very recently. I think, I'll give you an example and then close my remark with it. So we have, now WittyFeed is basically, WittyFeed caters to only the Indian audience. For Americans, we launched a platform called thepopper.com, which talks to the young Americans. Very recently, unfortunate demise of Atal Bihari ji happened, right? So WittyFeed was doing a story on, they were doing extensive coverage. Our Hindi platform, Dunia Digest, was doing an extensive coverage. Another platform which is for teenagers' opinions called Inner Voice was doing extensive coverage. The Popper team, which is a separate content team, I went to them and said, okay, what's your story on Little G? What are you doing on that? They're like, no, it's not our story. WittyFeed is doing it, their story, and these guys are doing it. I'm like, explain, why is it not your story? They said, we talk to the American audience, we talk to the English-speaking audience across the world, we just feel like it. Okay, so then I said, let me ask you a question. Okay, if the unfortunate incident of, let's say, Mr. Obama dying today happens, do you think WittyFeed would cover it? I said, yeah, they should. I said, would the Dunia Judges cover it? Yes. So I said, do you realize that you've been so, and Karolina actually talked about it in our video, that we're so in a colonized mindset that in our minds, that is global and WittyFeed should cover it. But Atal Bihari ji, which is probably the most prominent leader of independent India, died, and it is not a global story to them. They don't believe that they should put it on a platform that they control, which is global in nature, and 30 million Americans are going to come and consume it. I said, you need to come out of that right now, because this is not a platform. This is Indian media going global, and we need to do this story. And we did it, and it was amazing. So
I would like to continue add to that. With your first question about nomenclature, it definitely plays a very critical part, because that's where the ideology is rooted. That's what people consider the anchor, and then they can go anywhere else. But for me, I'm working here. My audiences and even my producers are primarily non-Indian people, and even if they're Indian, they're not Hindu to mind sometimes. And they're not villains, they're just not Hindu-minded. So I have to stay away from nomination till a certain point. If this movie works, and maybe the next two works, I can assure you by the fourth one I'll have the word Hindu coming in the movie without any kind of Three of my producers right now, two of them are practicing British Christians, and third one is the Ashkenazi Jew from Poland. And I could pitch them the idea that let's make a film about a girl and a journey with Indian classical music in background, and let me highlight its connection to astronomy. If I was pitching that, they were like, this is new for us, our audience might love it, we'll fund you. So we have to start that way. And the second question, that it's an organized, I think that was the first, it's an organized system, it's controlled by the Jewish lobby. That has to be an organized effort even from ourselves. It cannot be individuals who do it. They have had a 350 years of lead on this. They control the banking system, they control the taxation. You can't expect that to change overnight. It has to be, on an individual level, it has to be like this. It has to be subtle, small efforts. And once people like us are confident enough, we can pitch it to Hindu wealth systems. Like, okay, we now have the network ready, now give us money. And that's somewhere that we can start building the Hindu influence financial system in the media.
So there was a French guy yesterday in a media panel, and he said something which actually struck chord with almost everyone. He said, you know, the problem with Hindus is that you don't stand for yourself. You don't stand for your own kind. And that is a big problem. So let's say I'm doing this media, and I'm doing global media from India, being a Hindu, and I own, you know, and I influence 100 million young people across the world. I need support systems to make it to 200 million, to 500 million, probably 1 billion people in 10 years from now. And that support system has to come from our community if we really want to make sure that this platform stays what it is today. If there is going to be, you know, an investment from the other community, then the message is going to be diluted by default, right? That's how it works. So we need to stand for our own kind, and, you know, so that we can protect the heritage and we can take it forward. And that has to be done by the rich in the community, and they need to come forward and take lead.
So much work to be done, and we're all here because of the result of that. I think we've got time for one last question. Let's make it brief if we can, please. So we've got a mic, you have to go up here. You can always continue the conversation afterwards. Let's just have your name and your question, please.
Namaste, I am Pratik Chirania from California. My question is with respect to social media platforms. Recently, the CEO of Twitter admitted that there is some left-leaning bias in the company. So, do we have any efforts to have engagement with social media platforms to remove inverted or deliberate bias against Hindus, which might come to other bias as well, or any deliberate bias against Hindus? Do we have any efforts?
I have no idea, and I don't think I have the level where I can make that effort right now. But yes, if there is, and again, that's where more influential and, you know, our elders have to take some lead on that. And, I don't think I'm in the position right now to do that. I don't think you are as so
I think we're going to squeeze one more question in.
Yeah.
I just wanted to answer that question, because as the whole foundation, we at World of the Foundation have a Hindu Media Forum which aims to make a pool to disseminate content and to promote people like you. So hopefully very soon we should have a decent pool where we can actually fund activities, and we should be able to disseminate information from our point of view, and it's not going to be just an Islamized or a Christianized version or a distorted version of our review. So we are at it, and we need you people and more people like you to be in that team, to volunteer and to take responsibilities and to have active participation. We would do a session on it at the end of the day, on session 6. So be there and just see how we can all participate.
So I know where to come next time for funding.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Very quickly.
Namaste, my name is Murali, I'm from New Zealand. So the question is, you mentioned Hindu Dharma being, you know, open source or an architecture and all of that. So people, anyone can sort of claim to be Hindu or I'm Hindu, and whatever they practice, it's up to them. But now, in regards to in the media, people who are seeing, how do you regulate some of the things that are being said. So what, like one person can say one thing and they claim that, yeah, I'm speaking from a Hindu perspective. And the same guy can say something completely opposite and say, I'm Hindu and I'm speaking from a Hindu perspective. How do you regulate that, or like, from a media perspective?
So, frankly, that's a very complex and tough situation that we face today. In support of the open source argument, and then I'll take you home to the answer. Today, I lost the chain.
Not to worry, we'll have a discussion afterwards.
Should I pick it up?
Go for it, Aditya, go.
I don't think we should regulate people like that. Our central idea is inclusiveness, and such characters or such people will be there. Our job should be to have the right orientation. Just that. I think even as films and media, because if we start regulating, we are going to the other side.
Thank you again to our panelists. I think we've highlighted some of the importance of not just owning a narrative. If we are underrepresented, then once we are represented, how to redefine that narrative. So thank you for your time, and again, thank you to the panelists.